All right, we'll go ahead and get started now. It's just a couple minutes after 1 o'clock. Welcome to our presentation this afternoon. The topic we're going to talk about today is Beyond Bias. We're going to discuss a project creating programming for IT for the underserved. So as we get started, just to give you a little bit of a rundown on what we're doing this afternoon, we're going to start with some information on who we are, talk about our experiences and some of the people who were involved in this project. Then we will move into what we did, taking a look at the program as it was before Alec and I got involved. And then we'll jump into what we're doing now that we are involved. So what are the conclusions that we came to and how are we making things better? And then if we have some time at the end, we'll do some question and answer.
So to start things off, we'll just give you a little introduction to ourselves. My name is Alec Beckham, and I'm the Assistant Director of Learning Strategies. And I have been an ESL mostly teacher for the last 10 years and worked in various programs, both in ESL and adult basic education.
Chris Morphew, I also work at Literacy Council, and I am the Assistant Director of Development, also primarily an ESL instructor, background in linguistics, and now doing mostly program administration, working with grants and funding sources.
And not present with us today, but very important to our project is Terry Roeder. She was our instructor for the cohorts that we'll talk about today, and she will be our IT fundamentals instructor moving forward.
All right.
So we're going to talk about this IT programming that we are developing now, but to get into that and give you a sense of the students we're working with and kind of the reasons why we're doing this, we're going to turn it over to Terry and hear what she had to say about some of our students.
Population, although they were very high level English learners, except for like a student at the beginning who then dropped. They were, for the most part, moms. And they had like little kids. And so that is why that morning time slot was so golden for us, because their kids were in school. Sure. And for those who had really little kids, I was really flexible with, if you need to if you need that baby on your lap while we're in class, go for it. We had little kids running around. I mean, that was hard for me because of kind of like what I had done for a living, but I got really used to it. And they were very respectful. And if their child was screaming, they would mute themselves but they came. And that is so huge that they came with so you have a population of again, I think they are the most amazing group of people. But they had that challenge of and then June, get that, right? Now it's almost school's out, right? So now they're trying to keep taking this class. And Asil has left for Palestine for 3 months, and she's logging in from someplace and trying to be able to connect. And you've got other parents whose kid, they have to do all this parent-teacher meeting stuff. They are literally connecting from their cell phones from school parking lots. I mean, it was amazing, the dedication. But so that was the third. And then the third thing, and I know we talked about this initially, is these were not necessarily people who aspired to get a job in IT. So they were doing their best, but they had other stuff they were doing. Like, this wasn't like go home and do my homework. You know what I mean? Like, that wasn't their focus. They had a house to run.
All right. And so that, I think, gives us a pretty good picture of the community we're working with. So to get back into things, just a background on who we are. We are LCMC, the Literacy Council of Montgomery County. We are a nonprofit community-based organization, and we're focused on adult education. In the last fiscal year, we served somewhere around 3,000 members of our community, and we're looking to expand that quite a bit this year in different ways. And our mission is to advance social and economic equity for underserved adults through our academic instruction and workforce development. And we're doing that in several different ways. Primarily in the past, it's been ESL and GED focused, but we just launched this summer an entrepreneurship program, and we are, as you can tell from today, working on an IT pathway project.
So that's who LCMC is. Terry gave us a quick snapshot of who our students are and some of the obstacles that they have to overcome, but let's give some numbers. So LCMC started in 1963, primarily, as Alex said, as a literacy council working on language development, literacy skills, adult basic education, and we've branched out quite a bit from that. And our students are just as diverse as our programming. This last year, we looked at some statistics, and 19% of our students are Asian American, 14% are Black African American, 56% of our students are Hispanic or Latino, and we have 11% white students. So our demographics are pretty wide. In a lot of ways, they mirror the county that we're in and the area that we're in, looking into PG County, DC, Howard County. And we have a wide spectrum of types of students. We also work alongside a lot of partner organizations that kind of fills in some of those percentages. So the IRC, a refugee commission that helps students who have come from maybe for example now Afghanistan or Ukraine, or students who are coming from places of conflict. We work with Casa de Maryland to help people become citizens. They have advocacy and lawyer services, as well as we provide citizenship prep. We work with public schools in Montgomery County. So where if you have children in school in the day, you can take ESL programming, GED programming, IT programming, entrepreneurship programming in the evenings or the afternoons, while your kids are busy at school. We work with parks and planning. So if you're an employer and you have folks who you want to build skills with, we also service employers to get their employees the skills that they want, whether it be public speaking or writing and literacy skills. And we have other organizations as well. So our breadth of student population is very diverse. People coming from everywhere and doing everything. So let me turn it over to Alex to talk a little bit about why our presentation is about bias today.
So we found in working on this project and kind of through our experience in adult education over the last decade that there's a bit of a bias of low expectation for students in general, adult students specifically. And those come from these three different categories. The first one being external factors. So these are things around the student that they have to face and overcome in order to be successful. So the first one is simply their language, their first language, or any cultural barriers that they might have to interact with. So as they're moving into a new country or community, they have to spend time learning the language. In this case, English, which we know is a bit difficult. And this is something that they're going to have trouble with in every aspect of their life: healthcare, going grocery shopping, signing up for essential services, right? And then the cultural barrier side of that is things from their own community, right? So what are ideas that their maybe community, their family, their religion has that tell them you can't do this, right? Things where they might have to challenge those and upset members of their family or community in order to find the progress that they're looking for, right? Then we also have issues coming from racism in their community. There's a lot going on right now with negativity directed towards immigrant communities, people of color, and it's a big concern, of course, right? And so people might be worried about leaving their homes or going out into other areas of their community, especially places that they're not familiar with, and traveling alone. So that can be difficult. Then we have issues of gender and sex bias, and these can kind of go back to those cultural barriers. So this could be things from members of their community who are asking them or telling them, no, this isn't your job to do, right? This is your husband's job. Or no, men don't take care of children, right? This is your wife's job, and so on, right? But also from employers that they're looking to talk to, or their physicians, right? Connected then with that and also the racism issue is that physical safety aspect I talked a bit about, right? Not wanting to do things alone or outside of their communities. And so that kind of leads them to stay within their language or their cultural community, and they don't branch out as much. And then finally, perhaps the most important from this aspect is their financial issues, which we're looking to help them with. You know, money, of course, for education is a big issue, as we were talking about yesterday, I think, in some of our sessions. But it's more than that, right? We have the other costs of life: housing, healthcare, clothing, technology, transportation, and so on, right? And so by helping them build their skills in these other ways, they can improve those situations. Moving forward, we also have issues that are internal to the student. So the first one, of course, is motivation or self-esteem. Just finding the drive to join a classroom of their peers and practice a new language can be really intimidating. We hear from students all the time at the beginning of a course, this is too much for me. This is too difficult. I can't do this, right? And so we constantly have to help them and coach them and build them up, and show them that it's possible to do this. Then we also have found that many students have trouble setting goals to be successful. Of course, they know things like, I want to buy a house, or I want a new job, or I want to finish college, right? And so they can see on the horizon this big picture idea, but the intermediary steps to get there are kind of beyond them. Like, what is the flow or the process I need to follow to do this? Then there's the apprehension to technology, right? As you can see from our presentation here and our conference, right? Technology is very important in the workplace, and it's just a fact of life now. And we have a lot of students from communities where they're not introduced to it, or they've had very limited experience with it. So asking our students to come to a virtual class where they have to sign into Zoom and check their email and on, right, can be very intimidating. And then finally, there's just kind of a catch-all of internalized biases that they may have from those external factors. They've listened to the voices of others in their community, outside their community, and just taken those negative thoughts on and let it become a part of themselves. And it's all preventing them from moving forward.
So Alec talked about the factors outside looking in on students and factors inside the students looking out. And we wanted to kind of take some time to think about something that maybe we don't talk about a whole lot, maybe don't know is present, and we're calling this chunk program factors. So we had, between the two of us, a couple of decades worth of experience teaching and working with different kinds of programs, whether they be intensive English programs where students are primarily F1 visas, whether they're community-based programs like LCMC, whether they're grant-funded programs, or somewhere in between. We've seen a lot of types of programs, we've seen a lot of types of administrations, types of instructors, and of course, types of students. And there's some things for us to look at in ourselves, right? Like we can talk about external factors and racism coming from the community, and we can talk about students needing to learn to goal set, but we also need to talk about what we're bringing to the table. Ruth Seidenspinner yesterday talked about cultural norms and what you bring into a room as soon as you walk in, what the other students bring as well. And this section here is talking about what a program and an instructor might bring. So something that can happen, again, this is not pointing fingers at anyone. This is just something to consider as you go into your classes, as you go back to work next week. Sometimes there can be a tendency for classes to just be a fun place to be, right? Where we want our students to have a good time because of things that are happening outside of class. Because they've come from a country in conflict, we want them to come in and have a good time and forget everything else, right? That's one possibility. And that's not to say that having a good time in class is a negative thing, right? We obviously want students to be engaged, having a great time and learning, right? But if that becomes a sole focus, then that might lead us to the second bullet here, which is that measures of success can often get lower, right? Where not only are we so focused on having a good time that our students aren't learning rigorous content and studying in an intensive way, but we also might stop pushing them as much, right? We might have some of those internalized biases that the students have against our students, right? It's possible, again, not pointing fingers here, where we have some expectations on what they're going to be able to do. Well, this student is going to get their English improved and they're going to get a job. But we may not see this horizon that Alec talked about way down the line where the student becomes an IT professional, right? And begins working at Google and is making, perhaps more than we would make in education, right? And this third bullet here is, I think, kind of the hardest one to talk about. I've called it self-interest, where sometimes people get into human services, because it makes them feel really good. And again, it's not to say that you shouldn't feel good with your work. That's, often what keeps us coming back. But of course, it shouldn't be the only focus, right? So we've got this slide here because we're looking at what's happening outside the class, what's happening inside the student, and what's happening inside the class with regard to the instructors and ourselves and our administration. So now let's talk a little bit about what we did. Alec and I were handed the keys to this program, this IT program that we're going to tell you about, and here's what we learned. So let's talk a little bit about the needs of the program. Got a couple of, I think, really helpful statistics to look both at our students and, kind of probably a microcosm outside of that. The statistic says 94.5% of LCMC students, that's our students, do not have jobs that provide a living wage for this region as calculated by the MIT Living Wage Calculator. So that means that whether they're with us or right after us, they don't have the kinds of longevitous careers that we want them to and that they want to have. Less than 8% of white-collar jobs are held by Black workers nationwide, and the number is lower still in the Latino community. So what this tells us is that these biases are real, right? That our students not only are seen a specific way, but the outcomes are lower for all of the reasons that we've kind of talked about.
Sure. And so with those two statistics in mind and thinking about the kind of external factors that I discussed earlier, we reached out and took a look at our student population, and for this identified a cohort of students who we thought would most benefit from this kind of IT program. And so we found 20 students who we thought would be a good fit. All of those students were women of color or female immigrants. I think there was one case of someone who may have been born in the US, but is a citizen of somewhere else as well. They all have diplomas or equivalents, and many of them have children as well. So they're very busy outside of the classroom and are facing all of those challenges we've discussed.
So we knew and our students knew what they wanted to change, where they wanted to go. We've worked with them on goal setting. We had a group of students, and here were the goals of this program. We, of course, wanted to improve digital literacy. This was around the time of COVID, so obviously that was very important for all of our students. But the goal of these students was to get IT jobs. So we wanted to improve their literacy skills from wherever they were to a certain point. A secondary goal, the second goal would be to get them certified, specifically in the CompTIA IT Fundamentals certification. So we wanted these 20 students who were very busy, had this big lofty goal of getting IT certified. And then, of course, the next big jump there is once they're certified, getting them a job, right, in IT, changing their lives in this way. So we had these underserved students. We had an IT program that we put together for IT fundamental certification. It was rigorous. It was intensive. We had a curriculum that we had complex material. It was an advanced level for students. And Terry's going to tell us what happened.
But they kept coming and they kept working. But so that was another evolution of the course. Early on, what I thought would happen is I would assign reading. They would go home. They would watch the video that was associated with that in the book, the vignettes. Mm-hmm. And then they would do the reading and then they would come back in class. And then I realized really fast that was not happening. And it wasn't happening for two reasons.
So Terry left us on a cliffhanger here. And I think that statement at the end there that it wasn't happening, right? So we had this program, we had these students, and it didn't work. And so it was our job to find out why.
But they kept coming and they kept working.
So a more context on this program that we've kind of talked vaguely around until now. We ran 2 classes. Again, CompTIA IT Fundamentals was the certification aim, right? And what we discovered was that there was way too much content. The textbook that we were pulling from had 15 chapters of IT content across about a 10-week long class. And Alec will talk a little bit more about some other things that were included in the class. We had way too much content. If you've ever looked at an IT textbook, or even if you haven't, if you've looked at some of the tech terms on websites in Zoom or even in Google, it's hard, right? And if you're even an advanced level ESL learner, for example, the language level is super difficult. It's very hard. And that was a big barrier to our student success. The second bullet, the material didn't prepare the students for the exam, which is kind of a weird bullet to have up there. But what we found is that even with the materials in the textbook, even with the supplemental materials, when students actually got into practice exams, there was still more nuance to be discussed that wasn't even covered in the materials. So students were then having to do additional supporting studying in order to prepare for the exam. And we found that very problematic. And because of these things, what happens is outcomes are lower. Students are still working to take the national exam. They feel underprepared. They may not even want to try to take the exam. So we had a lot of problems, and we started to poke around and do research. We looked at other programs and IT courses. We looked at some open educational resources, looked through the Google Suite information, Microsoft Suite information, other local IT courses, and even national courses. We attended some presentations, tangentially related to the Department of Labor in Maryland, IET programming, if you're familiar with that. We wanted to see what other programs who were focused on getting students careers were doing.
And so from there, we decided moving forward, it would be a good idea to check in with both Terry and the students to see what was their experience with the course. And as we move forward, what can we learn from them to adapt to make this a more successful pathway for the students? So from Terry, we learned that the course itself was too short, much too short. Chris said that it was 10 weeks. And yes, this is true, but it was 10 weeks for IT fundamentals, plus all of Microsoft Office. The first component of the course was a full training on every application in the Microsoft suite. And so students did not have the time to make it through both of these sets of material and understand everything, right, with their level of English proficiency. Students were also a little bit unclear on the content and expectations of them as the students moved through it. They finished the Microsoft material somewhere around the 3rd or 4th week, and then were not quite aware that the ITF programming was coming, and there was much more difficult material to move forward. Not that this is a slight on Terry or anything, but the material was, there was just so much, right, as we've said. And Terry helped us identify the most important aspects of the material to focus on. We went through and looked at a breakdown of the topics on the test and really solidified which areas we wanted to build on or build out as we're creating new curriculum moving forward. And from that very helpful talk with Terry, we asked her to facilitate a focus group with the students. And we met with all of the students that attended her course. They were very excited to come back and share their thoughts about it. And the first thing that they said, and I think it was somewhere around 50% of them had the comment that they wanted more career advising and exploration. What is the purpose of this certification? What can I do with this? And to Terry's credit, she talked a bit about it, but we definitely want to reach out to different career services and businesses in the area and see, if there's anyone who would be interested in these kinds of students or supporting them, and what businesses might be a good fit for them. The students also commented about the material is that it was full of cultural knowledge and idioms and jokes that they were not prepared to understand. They said often in the additional explanational videos that the speaker would go through something and then at the end say something like, ah, just kidding, or whatever. And so from the student's perspective, they had to listen to all of that content, process everything, and then make sure that they heard that it was a joke, or now they've got the wrong information, right? And so that's very tough. And the final thing we learned from them is that they were all very interested in having an exam or the exam scheduled immediately after the end of the course. So when we met with them, maybe that was about 3 weeks ago at this point, they had finished the course roughly a month before that. And none of them had scheduled their national certification exam at that point. They had taken some practice exams, but they were studying and then forgetting to study, and then things were kind of gradually declining. And so definitely as a part of the course, getting them a date on the calendar to help motivate them and push them forward was requested.
So we've said a number of times, we had some things to fix. We had some big pain points and a lot of adjustments to make. So here's what we're doing. And so Alec talked about the student discussion that we had. And I would like to hear from one of our students. As Alec and I were planning out this class, as we're looking at how we're going to divide the material, we had an idea and we were sitting on it for a bit. And we had talked with our administration a little bit about how we wanted to organize some things. And this student here, Juling, really kind of hit the nail on the head. Let's hear Juling.
If it could be, you can spread 2 courses. One is easier for just a beginner, and one easier is much harder and more related material for the test. And now it's just in the middle. For the beginners, it's too hard and too hard to remember actually. And there's so many knowledge you need to learn, and you need to remember, you need to understand and use them in your daily life. And actually, it's very important for us to use their Word, Excel, PowerPoint. Actually, if you want to learn, that's a huge class when you learn how to use them in very detailed things. But for us, for us, we want to pass the national test. The knowledge is different, and some knowledge you couldn't even find on the book, and you needed to Google by yourself. And because when I tried to test when we finish the course and go to the new system for the test, actually many knowledge is new for us, but we already finished the course. You should know, right? But now it's new for us. It means you need to learn by yourself for the new knowledge and for the test.
So Juling's main summary here is that we needed more classes. We needed more divisions of where the material was split. And as I said, that's the idea we had. And it kind of caused a programmatic shift. We were no longer doing one class. We're now doing a suite of classes that start, as Juling said, at the very beginning and, get to the very end of the certification and hopefully job placement. So I'll talk very quickly about these points, and then we'll go into detail about each of the types of course that we're building out. We start with a digital literacy bootcamp. A bootcamp implies it's the very beginning and it's the bare bones information. Students can then move into a basic computer skills class. As the name implies, these are basic skills. Then we're building out a Google and Microsoft Suite separate classes, and then moving into the content that Terry has worked so hard with, the IT fundamentals classes, and off in the distant future, the horizon we've talked about a number of times, is an A+ certification, a really valuable certification for our students. So let's jump into the pathway, starting with the digital literacy bootcamps. Something we're really proud of as a program are these bootcamps. Every single one of our students is assessed not only for their program, what I mean is ESL, GED, ABE. If they're looking for entrepreneurship, we're getting to make sure they're in the right level. They are assessed for those things and always assessed for their digital literacy skills. We want to know that they can take class, that they can log in, that they can access the material, and they're going to be successful, and that the class itself is not a huge barrier to them. So every student takes a digital literacy assessment. If they fall below a specific threshold, then they are required to take this boot camp with their instructor. So let's say Alec is going to be your ESL instructor starting in November. You take your digital literacy assessment. If you score lower than we would like, you will actually on the first day of class be with your teacher, Alec, and he will instruct on this boot camp. This is part of every program that we have. So regardless of, again, if it's ESL, ABE, entrepreneurship, whatever it is, you will take a digital literacy bootcamp if necessary. So again, this is to get you in class and then do all the things around class, right? So, you know, you need to be able to create a password for your Zoom account. You need to be able to create a safe password for your Gmail that we provide students. You need to be able to access, to send, to receive emails. You need to know how to use the features in Zoom or Google Meet. You need to know how to use Moodle if you're using an LMS, a learning management system. And that's exactly what this bootcamp is designed to do. Get them up to speed so they can be successful in class. So then a student takes their ESL class, they move on and up the levels, and they say, I want to learn more about computers. So our second stop, and really the true first part of the pathway, is the basic computer skills class. So a student finishes their ESL class, they say to us, I want to learn more about computers. We have the perfect class for you, a basic computer skills class. And again, this is very basic. It starts, you know, kind of at the bottom, making sure that students know how to use a mouse, right? If you've worked with students who lack digital literacy, sometimes this is a huge barrier. Right-clicking or left-clicking, using the shift key or caps lock. So this class is designed to ideally be in person, where students are in a classroom and they have some kind of a device that they can work on and practice as their instructor is giving lessons, right? Now, because of COVID, we're still very, very limited and we're still doing a lot of things digitally. So we're finishing up a version of this class that is fully online and potentially in the future asynchronous as well. So I mentioned before that sometimes students will have very little digital literacy skills. And I'm not sure if we coined this term or if this has already existed, but the phrase a digital desert, right? Where a student may have not had any access to technology throughout their life. You know, these may be students that are coming from conflict areas, right? I mentioned before, we work with refugees from Afghanistan or you know, other places that may have very little technology, that the infrastructure there is in trouble. These could be students that are called SLIFE. These are limited or interrupted formal education, right? So maybe they couldn't finish school or never got to go to school because they had to work to support their family, even as a kid. These could be older learners, right? I come recently from a program that had a pretty large percentage of, let's say, older Korean women who, you know, grew up in Korea, came to the US, never needed technology. And, you know, as they got older, they, you know, decided they wanted to improve their English skills or their, you know, work towards getting a degree or certification, but didn't know how to use technology because they never needed to. So this class is designed for those students, right? This is available for anybody, you know, and these might be some of the populations that we have. This is an entirely separate class, and it builds on more than just I can come to class, right? We're teaching these fundamental skills that are going to push them onto the next steps on the pathway. So let's talk a little bit about those next steps.
So as we mentioned before, the original IT fundamentals course included not just that material, but also a full Microsoft Suites course. And we, you know, from the student discussion and the chat with Terry, realized that was too much to be in one place. So we pulled that out. Currently, our colleague, Jonathan Mendoza, has put together a course for Google Suites and is working on a Microsoft version as well. For this or these two courses, we used open educational resources to make use of things that were already available and adapt them. Google has put together a very robust library of guides and videos and different activities to practice. And these are all, you know, very, very helpful for the students. In addition to those, the Microsoft materials, we found a great collection through GCF Global, which I think is developed by Goodwill. Currently, these courses are in their initial stage, so we'll be using them to get students introduced and moving forward, but we will continue to develop those in the future to with the goal of getting student certificates. And so why do we want to do this? Well, both of these types of applications, the G Suites and Microsoft Office, are widely used throughout the business world, and it is going to help our students be successful in reaching those long-term goals to increase their economic equity. And it's also going to build a lot of transferable skills. Chris said a moment ago that we use Gmail and Zoom and Google Docs in class to help students learn the material that we're teaching. And so this will make them more successful in our classroom, but it's going to build those skills that will then make them more employable in the future and help them not only understand how to do things at their job, but if they're called on to ask to explain something, they'll be able to do so because they've done it in class. They've gone to a Microsoft or Google Suites course, and they've practiced it so many times that it's become familiar, right? And so then we get to kind of the big point of this pathway for us, which is the IT fundamentals course. So we looked at it, decided there was too much, pulled the Microsoft out, but there was still too much. So in order to get our students enough practice with the material, enough time to understand and solidify that content, we decided to separate it into 2 full courses. Both of these courses will be 8 weeks, and each of those weeks will focus on one of the chapters from the text, with a final week of just full review of all of the content. So what is the course going to look like? Well, it's going to be 2 days a week, if I didn't say that already. And each of those is 3 hours, which is the format of most of our courses. I'm doing the wrong thing. Thank you. And so in the course, what are they going to expect? Well, we found that our language learning practices or language instruction practices are a good fit for content as well. And so for the IT fundamentals content, the CompTIA exams, these are very focused on explanation of ideas, of understanding and implementing theories. And so we can't just have them memorize definition or answers, right? They need to understand what to do in a situation. And so to help with that, some things we're putting in will include some vocabulary matching activities, either through some whiteboard technologies online like Jamboard, another of those Google Suites programs, or other interactive things. We'll also have spontaneous explanations of different topics. So perhaps a round robin style, give a student a topic like, tell me everything you know about RAM or processors for 1 minute. Let's hear it, right? And yes, of course, that sounds intimidating, but through this course, students will learn what those things are and how to talk about them. And we'll also ask them to create their own questions and quizzes, either for themselves or for other students in the class, so that they're, constantly reviewing this. We also plan for mini projects every couple of weeks. And so a couple of ideas that we had, they might be, just a simple like research project on a different topic. What is what is the #1 manufacturer of this product, or what is the #2 and why aren't they the #1, right? Or since they're going to be IT professionals, give them a tech support situation, right? You're at work and the printer goes down and you need a new one today, right? So go to Best Buy or some other hardware store, look at the options and select one that you can bring back to the office. And then explain why. Why did you pick this printer and not printer B over here? What were the benefits of this one, right? And then, of course, as we've said many, many times, there's so much content in this course that the class will not be enough, right? If you've ever looked at one of the CompTIA textbooks or an IT textbook, there's just so much material and it's very dense. And so students are going to have to be reading at home, reading in class, practicing in class, reviewing, right? And spending a lot of time by themselves working on the material in addition to their classwork, unfortunately. Okay, so now that we've talked about all of the pathways, what is that going to look like? How is it going to happen? So this month, starting actually this week, we are going to run 2 cohorts, one for our basic computer skills class and another for the Google Suites class. I think Terry is running one of those and Mr. Mendoza is running the other one. And then next month, our first cohort of IT fundamentals will begin. Terry will come back as our instructor for that and continue to provide feedback so that we can update the curriculum as we go and build out that solid foundation.
So as we go into the spring, we'll finish out other pieces on the pathway, one of which being Microsoft Suite. Jonathan Mendoza is developing this. Alec has mentioned that. So we add a third chunk there, and our first cohort of IT fundamentals will finish in January. And because this is towards the tail end of the pathway, that's where our real tracking and surveying happens. Obviously we're gathering feedback from Terry as she teaches the class, but we also want to get the students' take, right? That was very valuable as we looked at past programs, and we want to continue to use their feedback going forward. So tracking their outcomes in the class and where they go after that, getting feedback and surveys on the class. They move from IT Fundamentals Part 1 into Part 2. So they're now in the last leg of the track, headed right towards an A+ certification course, right? So at this point, we're identifying the students that are ready to go into the A+ certification. We do a recruitment campaign, gather information, start that process. At this point, all the pieces of the pathway are up and running. So then we run iterations, right? Continuous feedback, updating curriculum materials, things like that. But we've got all those pieces that we mentioned before up and running and cycling through different cohorts and theoretically getting students from basic computer skills up to certifications and working with agencies to get jobs after that. So because Terry has been kind of the heart of this whole project, she was the instructor, right? So she's done a ton of work on curriculum and working with students. She's also kind of been, to be a bit cheesy, the emotional heart of it. She's fought so hard for these students and adjusted so much for them to make sure that they're as successful as they can. And, we'd like to let her get the last word here.
Director. So when you put this on your resume, if you're looking for an IT position, IT companies know what CompTIA means. They know what IT fundamentals means. So they know that this is a certification, that you had to go through a testing process. So that carries value. To Chris's point, if you're applying for jobs that, maybe you don't want to go into IT, but you want to do, just so many other things out there. Everything involves technology, it seems. Putting this on your resume is a talking point. And so when I say talking point, what that means is I'm an HR director. I see Eunice's resume and I say, Eunice, it says here that you completed this IT fundamentals. Tell me about that. And you talk about what those skills that it took for you to pass that test, using your English language skills and your that you had to be very focused and structured. And those are huge deals for HR and managers to see in an applicant. It says a lot about who you are that you went through this. So it's a great question, Asil. And it sounds like Alex said, maybe some more info can be shared with you guys, more specific, that don't minimize what you've done.
All right. I think that will do it for us, but we are available to answer any questions that you may have. And we can do that now. And if you think of any after this presentation is ended, you can email either of us at the addresses here.